See what you were just saying from that, Rolly, is toxic environments aren't necessarily something that we pick up well when we're in the middle of them, are we? Because working hard is not something we're against. Being pushed, having quite high expectations isn't something that we're necessarily against. But I think what happens over time, and you particularly found this, I assume, because you were there for 2+ years, is that you begin to see the effect it's having on you. And that detrimental effect stops you wanting to come in, say, on a Monday morning. You start to see everybody's well-being being eroded. You see sickness, absence going up. So presumably these were all the symptoms or the characteristics of what you spotted when you were there.
Absolutely. Yep.
And it's
the interesting thing about it. The interesting thing about that type of environment is, while it sneaks up on you, the challenge is that getting through to the higher levels of leadership, that it's happening, and being able to release the blinders a little bit to see where those challenges are. In my experience as an executive level over the years, sometimes we kind of get displaced, right? Where there's this gap or this distance between us and our frontline workers, and even middle management, even those that we lead. Sometimes there's this gap there. Because from our perspective, everything looks like it's going great, but there are some signs that we can look at from that level to see that there's some challenges there that points in the direction of where the issue resides. It's a choice, right, for us at that level, whether or not we are going to open our eyes and see things from that perspective, or we're going to place blame elsewhere. So that's a choice that we all have. Unfortunately, in Sherri's situation, the blame was always placed elsewhere. And when that blame was placed elsewhere, it was then continued to go on. It was almost as if the blinders were put on and wasn't able to be seen, even though that there was just an enormous amount of turnover in that department, even though there was an enormous amount of people getting sick. And
there was data to prove it too.
And there was data to prove it.
This is, you know, if you want to say, oh, well, it's just them, or it's just the people, they weren't the right fit, like putting blame on what he's saying. There was even the infamous survey, right, that we all encourage in organizations to get a temperature check of, you know, how your employees are feeling, what they want, what they don't want. And there was clear data of what was going on. And again, it was not taken seriously, or just kind of, again, put the blame on everybody else.
Or pay lip service to it, don't they? You know, they send out your standard survey or similar, or whether somebody even bothers to actually ask you, how are you? And the struggle is you don't get heard. And partly because they're not really asking, you know, they're asking, but they don't really want to know. Or in the worst case, they don't ask. And this is probably where my conclusion's coming from, that a business has to want to know how its employees are doing, even if they get told there's a pretty tough message, which in your case, you know, they would have had to have wanted to hear, didn't they?